Welcome to the More Demand podcast, where we help you generate more demand for your products and services. Every episode we give you tips, tricks and tutorials on how to get the best out of your digital marketing. Less frustration, more demand. Here's your host Lawrence Howlett with this week's freshest tips.
Hello and welcome to the More Demand podcast, episode number 16. Content Marketing, How to Get Started with Joe Pulizzi. Joe today is my special guest. He is the founder of the Content Marketing Institute, the leading education and training organisation for content marketing, which includes the largest in-person content marketing event in the world, namely the Content Marketing World. Joe is the winner of the 2014 John Caldwell Lifetime Achievement Award from the Content Council, and his third book, Epic Content Marketing, was named one of the 5 must-read business books of today by Fortune magazine. And today we're lucky enough to have Joe on the line with us to talk about how to get started in content marketing. We'll go through how to create a loyal audience, email list building, influencer marketing, easy content creation, and loads more. So without further ado, let's welcome Joe onto the call. Hi Joe, thanks for joining us today on the More Demand podcast. How are you doing?
Lawrence, I'm doing fantastic. It's good to be alive. How you doing?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Looking forward to chatting about content marketing today and talking about how we actually start creating epic content. So a lot of my audience is just getting started with content marketing. So talk us through why content marketing is so critical to getting visibility for products and services and then turning those prospects into some paying customers.
Well, I mean, to put it the simplest way I can, your customers have complete control over the information they want to engage in. I mean, they have a 24/7 device called a smartphone in their pocket. They have access to tablets and PCs, desktop, whatever the case is. They can get all the information they want, which means they can ignore all your product and service information. So if you want to get in front of your customers before they're ready to buy, you have to create interesting information that's targeted to their pain points or entertainment needs, just a similar way a media company would. In the past, if you look at it 25 years ago, 30 years ago, there were only 8 ways consumers could get information. Now there's hundreds of different ways,
For sure.
and they can afford to ignore. So that's why advertising used to work in the past. Consumers didn't have an option. Today it's a little bit different, so we've got to figure out, okay, well, what's keeping our customers up at night? How can I form a trusted and loyal relationship with them through content? And unfortunately, Lawrence, a lot of companies just aren't used to doing that.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of my audience are just sort of waking up to that fact and just getting started. So let's take a step back a moment and think, how do I even start creating a plan for, say, a smaller business that only has, maybe 4 or 5 people in the team? They maybe have a single marketing person or a very small team. I mean, where do you start with all this content that you could create, blog posts, articles, whatever it is? Where do you start?
Sure. Well, most small businesses start and they say, I want to do a blog or we need to do content for Facebook, and you're already you're starting the wrong way. So
Sure.
the first thing we want to figure out is, what story do we have to tell that's at all related to what we have to sell? So what are our skill and knowledge areas that we could really position ourselves as the leading informational experts in the world about something? And I'm totally serious when I say that, because I talk to small businesses all the time. I'm like, look, you have to target a very particular audience with a very particular need, and you have to figure out how you can create ongoing and consistent information, however that information gets out. Ultimately, you might say, well, that could be a video series, could be a podcast series, could be blog posts, lots of different ways to do it. But we have to go to the beginning and say, okay, who's the audience? What's keeping them up at night? What are their informational pain points? And then what stories can we tell on a consistent basis and deliver to them so that we can build an audience? That's the most important thing. We want to build an audience first, build their loyalty, have them know us, like us, and keep that relationship going so that at the end of the day, they're more likely to buy from us. It's a long process. It takes time. If you look at the greatest media, we're basically saying that we have to be media companies. If you look at the greatest publishers and media companies of all time, it took them months and years to get started. This is not something where, oh, hey, I'm going to see results in the first 3 months. If that's the case, go buy advertising.
Yeah,
go buy pay per click. Go do that kind of thing. If you want to create an audience long term that you can build loyalty and trust with, that at the end of the day, you could basically sell them whatever you want. It's going to take time to get there. So first, start out with who the audience is. What's that unique story that you really can deliver valuable information on an ongoing basis that no one else is doing, at least as well as you can? And then you figure out that channel. Is it a blog? Is it a podcast? And how often do we need to produce that content and distribute it?
Sure. So you mentioned there a couple of times about storytelling. So that's something a lot of people struggle with for the first time. It's something that they do with their kids at night, maybe, and they're not sure how that transpires into a business sense. So can you just try and fill us in a little bit about what you mean when you're talking about storytelling in a business context?
Well, when you basically, the easiest way to think about it is from a business to business standpoint, because it's hard for small B2B companies to put their arms around this. Easiest way to do it is what are the top 50 questions that you get from your customers all the time that you don't necessarily have answers for on your website or that you're sharing? I mean, those are they're not about how much does your product cost. And tell me about this amazing feature. Your customers don't care about that, right? Your customers don't care about your products or services or anything you have to sell. They care about their own pain points. So that, first of all, you have to find out what those pain points are and how can you solve those pain points through content. And basically, when we talk about telling stories, and we're not talking about fairy tales, we're talking about creating, if you're using examples, if you're basically creating suspense in the type of content that you're creating so that people want to engage in it. Like I just finished writing a book, and I would say every other page of the book, there's a story in it. There's a story about how some company overcame some difficulty and then how they solved that problem. That's just a very simple way to look at it. It's not about, oh, here's your problem and here's how my product can solve your problem. That's sales information. We have plenty of that information. Yep. You don't need to do any more of that. What we need to do is figure out, okay, because at the time that you're talking about problems and solutions with your customers, with your audience, they're not even thinking about a product to buy. They're trying to solve a problem. They don't know necessarily that your product may be the solution. It may or may not be. We want to educate them so that hopefully we're creating better customers, and we create better customers. That gives us the opportunity and the competitive advantage.
Sure. So you mentioned there a few different ways you're telling stories. So you want to add a bit of suspense in there and get them onto the next. Oh, I need to go a little bit deeper down the funnel. I need to put my email address in now to get that next bit of content. So how do you structure that in terms of do you have a lead piece of content that then creates a maybe a drip feed campaign or something like that that will send out a bit more content?
So it's a great question. There's all different kinds of ways to do content marketing. You may say, look, I want to take, I've got somebody that's aware, and I want to take that prospect that's aware, and I want to get them through that, and we call it the messy middle, so that they're close to converting. And Then you've got conversion type content. Then you've got content that, hey, I want to keep my customers loyal and retained, or maybe want to get them to buy more stuff or stay more loyal. How do I do that? That's a different portion of content. But just to simplify it, I want everybody to focus on, first and foremost, because you can get into the weeds on this and we could talk about it all day. I really want them to focus on building an audience. Okay. Because most businesses, especially small businesses, they don't think about it. They think, oh, we got to generate leads, demand generation. We got to get more people at the top of the funnel. That's fine. Those are all good things, and content can help you do that. But what I want you to think about, how do you build an audience similar to what a media company would? How do I get 10,000 email subscribers, and how do I get them to want to get my messaging on a weekly basis? Thinking about something like that. Because as we look at some of the greatest small business examples of all time, all they did to start with, they didn't say, look, we're gonna try to get them aware of us and then through the funnel and sell them something. The greatest small business examples just said, look, we feel this is really related to the things that we want to sell. We're going to create a really loyal audience about this problem or this area that nobody's really answering, and we're going to do it better than anyone else. And then they get them as a loyal audience, and then they end up selling whatever they want.
Yeah.
So it's just like sometimes we just make it too complicated. And it can be complicated, but for a small business, really all you really need to focus on now is, look, who is that audience? Who will be our best customer? Because if we think about it that way, when you're building an audience, let's say you're building a list of email subscribers that want to get some content from you. That's a future customer database.
Yeah.
Those will be your customers. They're just not your customers yet. But you're doing that. You're setting this the path for them to become customers through content marketing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're almost, they're pre-sales. You can get those people in, and you can even then use those to do feasibilities on stuff that you want to make, for example. So, if you want to create a video learning series and then sell that to your audience, well, you can ask them to vote with their credit cards up front, and test that idea before you've even started on months and months of creating a VLS series. So,
well, if you look at, this is a big company example, but if you look at Kraft Foods here in the States, what they do is they use craftrecipes.com, and they take all the data from that so they can share that data with product development, because that's really amazing insight. What are people searching for? What kinds of recipes do they like the best? What are some breakout recipes that we didn't really expect? And then they take that and they create new products from it. So it's just interesting how there's all different types of business problems you can solve with content. But the core thing is, and we didn't talk about it too much, but it's so important. Most small businesses, when they're starting content marketing, they don't have a plan at all. There's just like, I want to do a blog, or we need to create content on our Facebook page or Twitter. No, you don't. You need to figure out, why are we doing this in the first place? Who are we targeting, and what the heck are we going to talk about? And nobody starts there. So I would just encourage people to start at the beginning, to have some kind of a plan. And then you can work that plan instead of starting at execution and sort of falling into, what were we doing this for, and how are we measuring it?
Yeah, sure. So once we have got that sort of plan together, and we understand who our audience is, so maybe we've done some buyer personas, and we've worked out that we want to speak to John Smith, who's 30 and he's working in whatever company it is. I always take the example of a luxury safari holiday company. So they've got tons of great content they can create. They know who they want to speak to, but what are possibly some of the biggest impact content pieces? Is it video? Is it blog posts? Is it podcasts? Or does that depend on what market you're in? Are infographics dead? These are some of the questions that I get asked all the time. So where should people start in terms of, should they go down a video route, or what's some of the easiest ways into content?
So when we look at, because we just did an analysis of a number of smaller businesses and looked at what they did, the most popular and maybe the easiest or the lowest barrier to entry is just the blog. Creating a blog, getting ongoing content on that blog multiple times a week and on a consistent basis with an email offering. So it's just like, okay, well, people aren't necessarily going to sign up to the blog, but you can attract them in through search engine optimization, through social media. They go to your blog, and then you try to get them to sign up to some kind of email offer, and then you have your subscriber, you have your audience. That's probably the most popular. Podcasts are just taking off right now.
Yeah.
We're seeing a second revolution in podcasts. So you're seeing, all kinds of, and that's where, sort of the marketing advertising area of podcasts, that's we're seeing a lot into that area, but not as much into some of the B2B areas. And if you think about
John Lee Dumas is killing it with Entrepreneur on Fire.
He's just, and that, by the way, great example to look at. We actually looked at his example as well, and he's built up a multi-million-dollar operation. And it took him about 18 months to get there, but here he is, and he's doing his thing and building a massive audience. So podcasts are a way to look at it. Videos, so I guess another good one is Game Theory. Matthew Patrick, he's got over 4 million subscribers, and every week he does a 10-minute video, basically combining analytics and gaming. That's sort of his niche, and really but he's been doing it over a year. So all over the place, we looked at these situations. It really doesn't matter, Lawrence. It's like, could be email, it could be video, it could be textual, so it could be through the blog, it could be audio through a podcast. What we did find out is, what does it have to be? It has to be, of course, has to solve informational pain points. It has to be somewhat entertaining. It has to be consistent. Most important thing, even over quality, is consistency. because that's where most of the time it breaks down. It has to be consistent, and then you have to do it over a period of time. The average, when we look at it, the average small business, it took between 15 and 17 months for them to monetize that. So those people listening to this and they say, look, I want results in 3 to 6 months. I'm sorry. Do something else, right?
Yeah,
go do something else. But if you want a long-term asset and to build an audience and to have content really work for your business, it has to probably be over 12 months. So honestly, then you really look at, okay, do I do video, audio, or text? Look at your own passion points and skill areas in your organization. What are you guys best at? Maybe you like to do video. Maybe audio is the way to go. Maybe you have a CEO that just doesn't like to write, but they like to talk in front of a camera all the time. So those are the things that you take into consideration to see what works for your company.
Awesome. So with that, you almost touched on getting content out there, and then a lot of my audience get really demotivated when they've written a ton of blog posts, they've maybe done some videos on YouTube, and it's just not getting watched, or it's just not getting read, or there's no comments coming in there, likes or shares. So just share with us some of maybe 3 pieces of advice that would help with content engagement.
Well, I think that if you are a small business and you're not leveraging influencers in your industry, you're at a loss. So what I want to do is, when I'm starting this out, when I'm targeting my audience, I want to find out, okay, well, where's my audience hanging out when they're not on my site? And I'm going to make a list of those places, and those places are what I would call your influencers. Those are places where your audience is hanging out, and you want basically to steal that audience from those influencers and have them come over to you. I mean, there's a better way to put it, but I'm just going to put it bluntly. You want to steal that audience because we're all fighting for time, right? So I would start to list those influencers and then figure out, how can you work with those influencers? The best way to start is to start sharing their content to your audience. And there's a little bit of that goodwill, share along, get in front of those influencers, and then they start to notice. You have to do it strategically or they're not going to notice. So get that in front, and every day start sharing that influencer content so they know that when you reach out to them, they'll actually know who you are. Bake that influencer content into your content. So let's say you do an ebook or a white paper. Take some of the influencer content, put it in your pieces, and link out to their sites, and then let them know. Maybe they're willing to share it. So what you could obviously do pay-per-click, and you could do paid social media, you could do native advertising, you could do those kinds of things with your content, but a lot of small businesses don't have the budget. So you have to do a little skunkworks operation and make sure that, hey, how can I get other people to share my content? Sometimes I would say less is more. That we've got this, and of course we fell down this path because that's what Google did. Is Google rewarded people who created a lot of content, short content that focused on the right keywords, and we blasted that out. Well, now Google's coming back, and a lot of the long form content, it's not 200 words anymore on a blog post. Sometimes it's 800, 1,000 or more. Those are the ones they're going up in the ranks on certain keywords. So I would look at, really do a keyword analysis of what types of keywords, and you can use obviously Google AdSense program. You could use Google Trends is a great tool to use, where you can find out, okay, what are my customers typing in, maybe what are some breakout terms. Like for Content Marketing Institute, we have a rolling list of 50 words that we look at, 50 phrases that we look at every month. We know where we are, we know what we need to do, we know what content is already ranking, and then we focus on making what's ranking better. If we don't have something ranking, we want to make a piece of content around that. Instead of I just see so many businesses just creating we got to do a blog post today. Instead of saying, okay, well, this blog post is focusing on this customer pain point, so that fills the content gap. And this blog post also focuses on this keyword phrase we're going after. Sure. So thinking a little bit more strategically. And I think if you do, you don't have to just say, oh, we've got to do all this content. Sometimes less is more. Like back to the Matthew Patrick example in game theory, he does one piece of content a week.
Yeah,
one a week, and it's really good.
Yeah,
it's amazing. So I mean, look at the greatest television or Netflix series you like to watch. I mean, it doesn't have to be a blog post every day. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. Just focus on what can you do better than anyone else, and you find the consistency that makes the most sense with the resources you have.
Yeah, I mean, some of the, that sort of epic content that we're talking about, you look at people like Moz, for example, and their introduction to SEO, and, content that goes, as John Lee Dumas always says, 1 inch wide but 1 mile deep. And that's absolutely true. You've really got to create that epic content.
That's such a great point. That's where I would say almost all businesses go wrong, because they go too broad. And then you say, what's your content niche? Remember, you don't have to target all your customers at this point. You want to target one particular group of customers. And if you can't say, look, what we're trying to do, if we execute it properly, we could be the leading informational experts about that niche. If you can't honestly say that, you're doing it wrong. Like most businesses we talk to, I'm like, okay, I asked that question, and they're like, no, there's 10 other companies that are doing this and probably 100 more. I'm like, well, why would they care about what you have? Why would anybody care about what you're talking about if they can get it in 100 different places? You have to have something different that they can't get anywhere else, and usually that's because you're not going niche enough.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just going to change the track a little bit. And in your book, Epic Content Marketing, you talk about getting the whole team involved in content marketing and producing content potentially. So have you got any sort of successful case studies or things that you could share with us that have worked, really well in getting, some teams who, maybe have not used content marketing before, not created any content, think, how am I going to do that within my job role, and how you set aside time and resource for that?
One of my favorite case studies is OpenView Venture Partners. They're an investment company out of Boston, Massachusetts in the States. And what they did is they wanted to, create a blog program. They knew what they wanted to be around. It was targeting entrepreneurs and small businesses at a certain size and growth rate. So they had that all figured out, but they had subject matter experts. And I think that's what you're talking about. You have employees that are subject matter experts. They have the information, but it's hard to draw that information out. So they, at the time, OpenView had about 50 employees, and they said, look, who are the ones that really want to do it? Who are the ones that are already creating content? Maybe they have their own blogs or a really good social media presence, and they went out to them first. So you go out to your early adopters. You don't find somebody that just doesn't like to create content, doesn't want to be involved, and you're going to force them into a process that's never going to work. Focus on the ones that really want to do it. You might have 1 or 2, 3, maybe 5 in your organization. Start with that as a beta test. Get them creating content. Don't make the processes too strict. Like, don't say, oh, you have to use this project management system or content collaboration system. Get the content however you have to. That could be sitting in front of them. Maybe it's sitting like you and I are, recording it, getting the raw content. It could be, recording it on a smartphone. It could be email, Q&A, back and forth. Whatever it needs to be, get it the way that you need to, because your editor in your organization, which I think is the most important thing, you need an editor to take that content, that raw content, and really tell a story with it, create something that's really engaging to that audience. So once you start there, and let's say you get 3 or 4 people in your organization creating content, you share those results out with your organization. Now, what OpenView has been able to do, this is a 3-year process. Now they have 90% of their employees creating content in some way.
That's incredible.
They have a tote board in the organization that says which ones get the most page views, which ones get the most shares. There's a competition, because the one that wins the competition every quarter gets a prize, like a trip to Tahiti. Like they get something pretty significant.
Yeah, for sure.
And because now they all want to share, and we don't realize that employees are sometimes our best marketers. Not only are really amazing content creators. So I'd say start small, focus on a core that really almost understand. You probably already do in your organization, have people that like to create content or maybe are intrigued about social media. Those are the ones we want to start with. Help them be successful. Once those employees are successful, they'll tell the rest of the employees. You'll get that out, and the other ones will come on board.
Yeah, well, that's excellent advice. And one thing that I picked out there was, don't force them to use a particular system. The system that works is the one that they use. So, make sure that they're just getting the content across as any way they want. If they're writing it down or anything, us as content editors can bring that then together and make it look web smart, as it were.
Great point. Yeah.
So obviously you've created a ton of content for the Content Marketing Institute. How do you think that has particularly influenced the success of that organization?
Well, that's an easy question, Lawrence. Without what we've done in content creation, we wouldn't have a business. I mean, we have about 120,000 subscribers right now. We don't generate any revenue until they're a subscriber. I was 99% of our revenue from our events, from anything we do online and our training products, anything that we sell, first comes in through somebody that signs up to a free content offering that we give out. Usually the way that it works is we have a daily blog. We send that blog out. People can subscribe to either getting the daily blog via email or a weekly newsletter. And they're persuaded, let's say, to sign up in a lot of cases because we give them a free report or a really helpful ebook of some kind, a template to help them do their content marketing better. I mean, it's not rocket science. There's a lot of companies that do this.
Yeah, and it's building a bit of trust there as well.
Yeah, we're just building the trust, and then we know. Then what we want to do is we want to wrap. We want to wrap our audience in content love. So our goal is three things. So I want somebody signed up for the newsletter. I want them to go to our webinars, and I want them to, let's say, sign up for our magazine chief content officer. If we get them to sign up to three things, we have about 8 different offerings. If we get them to sign up to 3 things, we have just set the percentages to a whole different level for them to pay for something. We know this is true because the data that we have through our analytics and our marketing automation system tells us that this is true, along with the hooking it up through our CRM. By the way, it takes a little while to do this. It took us a couple years to figure this out. But now that we know this, we're like, oh my gosh. So we don't, somebody signs up for the email offering. We don't sell them anything. We don't want to pitch them on anything. What we want to do is get them in. We want to create that trust. We want them to help them in their problems more and more, because we know if we do that, they'll ultimately buy stuff from us, and it just takes time to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an overnight thing that they're going to go, oh, right, I signed up to the blog, now I've got this download, now I've got that. That doesn't happen all in an hour. That's going to take weeks and months to nurture that lead, from a prospect all the way to a paying customer.
So that's right.
So just tell us a bit more about your book, Epic Content Marketing. I think it's out now, am I right? And
Yep, you got it. Epic Content Marketing is out now. I mean, basically, it goes through. The reason why I ended up writing this book was just because after every presentation I would give, they'd say, "Well, I need a manual to do this whole thing. How do I get started? How do I find the right content creators? How do I integrate it in the organization? How do I look at my marketing automation program and do this the right way? How do I measure it?" That's Epic Content Marketing. So if you can't figure this thing out, I mean, we put everything in there. It's got probably 100 case studies in it.
Yeah.
Big company, small company, B2B, B2C, nonprofit, and you can just figure out how to do it. And it's just finally now we have something we can give to people and say, look, just read the book. And if you read the book, you will be able to do this thing. And it just, to your point, it just takes patience and time. But that's what I love about it. We're actually seeing companies become successful and figure this thing out. The ones that don't give up, the ones that go beyond the 9 to 12 months, and those are the ones that are seeing success.
Yeah, for sure. So just before we wrap things up today, just fill me in on something that you are most excited about right now in the world of content marketing.
Well, and I'm not pitching, but I'm very excited about it. So my new book that I'm working on right now is called Content Inc. And Content Inc. will be out in September at Content Marketing World. So Content Marketing World is our big show, content marketing event, and I'm going to launch the book there. I'm excited about that book because we looked at countless companies that literally had no budget. They were startups, they were entrepreneurs, they were small businesses, they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. How are they going to do a content marketing program? Because that's what I get from small business all the time. We don't have any money, we don't have any budget, we can't do this.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we have examples throughout this book. It's a whole model. It's a 6-step process, because I looked at all these countless examples and we went and reverse engineered them, and we said, well, what did each one of them do? And we found out there were 6 things, 6 very specific things that they do, and we worked it backwards, and that's what the book is. It basically is, hey, if you don't have a budget and you want to do this thing and you want to build an audience and end up actually monetizing that audience in some way, Here's the 6 steps. So that's the book I'm working on. Actually, I was working on it right before
Awesome.
we had this interview set up. And so that'll be out in September. And I'm super excited about that coming out, because finally now I can go to those small businesses and say, yes, you can do this too. And you don't have to have a big budget. You just have to have focus and determination. And here it is. Here's the manual for you.
And that is exactly why Joe is a really good storyteller and builds suspense. You know, he mentions the 6 steps, and then boom, he's going to hold back until until the book comes out, right? So.
Hey, it's all, I can give them to you now if you want the 6 steps. It's all good. I can share that too. Hey, I'll do that. Let's do that.
Okay.
So
cool.
Let's go through the 6 steps. So the one is you call it the sweet spot. You find the sweet spot, which is a combination of what your passion area is in your organization versus a knowledge and skill area that you really have. And that combination is the sweet spot. The second part, almost every company has a sweet spot. The problem is nobody goes to step 2, and that's the content tilt, where you look at that content a little bit differently. And that's what we talk about with the John Lee Dumas example, where you were uncovering a content niche, an underserved content niche that no one else is covering. So you're really focusing on that. Once you do that, then you build the base. Consistent content over a long period of time to a very specific audience through one channel, one platform. It's like most people think, oh, we need to do content, we need to share it all over the place. No, we need to focus on one platform over a long period of time consistently. And that's what all these examples ended up doing. Then we need to harvest that audience. How do we harvest? We need to basically get subscribers. And the number one thing is to get email subscribers first over things like iTunes and YouTube, because you have the most control over your email subscribers. Once you get those subscribers, then you diversify your content channels. You say, oh, okay, well, I've got a blog. Now I'm going to launch a podcast. Now I'm going to launch a print book or a print magazine or an in-person event. But you don't do that until you have a large enough audience that you can make that happen, that you get them involved in other content offerings. And then the last one is monetization. As I said before, takes in most cases between 15 and 17 months to monetize, and you could be monetizing it through advertising, through paid content offerings, through selling more of your products and services. And we looked at all those examples. So that's the 6 things. And what I loved about it is it's not complicated. It just takes focus, time, a strategy, and any company. And we've got examples from all over the world in all different industries. And as you could tell, I'm a little excited about it because it's like, anybody can do this. And that's what I did and we did at the Content Marketing Institute. We launched it the same way with a blog, and then diversified, and then monetized it. And so I'm just excited that this is a possible thing and anybody can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what gets me so excited about working with small businesses, is the fact that you can absolutely do it. You know, there is no mega rocket science. You know, we're not trying to build a spaceship here. It's pretty simple tactics, and it just takes a bit of hard graft, to be honest. You know,
Absolutely.
So, if people wanted to get in touch with yourself and learn more about the book and maybe the CMI, where can they go and do that?
Sure. EpicContentMarketing.com is the book. Content Marketing Institute is the site. I've got 2 podcasts on iTunes right now. One's called This Old Marketing, which we basically cover the news every week. And then Content Inc., the podcast about the book I just talked about, is also released. I got quite a few episodes on that already. I do 2 episodes a week. And then anything on me, you can find me at joepulizzi.com.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate your time. And I'm sure the More Demand listeners got a ton of value from the show today. Now, I want to take a moment to talk to you, our dedicated listener. We're starting a new feature called Ask Lawrence, very original, right? Where each month we'll be answering your questions. It's really easy to submit your question as well. You can send them directly to me, Lawrence at moredemand.co.uk. That's Lawrence, LAWRENCE at moredemand.co.uk. Or you can submit them via our website, www.moredemand.co.uk/Ask Lawrence. Again, that's Lawrence with a W, LAWRENCE. The first show will be aired on February 24th, 2016. So make sure to submit your questions by February 12th to be considered for inclusion in the show. Really look forward to getting your questions. Make sure you get them in nice and quick for me so I can put a lot of time and effort into answering them for you. Until next week, thanks for listening and we'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the More Demand podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes and get the latest episode direct to your device every Wednesday.